Tonight, high drama. Americans are glued to their televisions as a homemade balloon flies out of control for hours. But the 6-year-old boy once believed to be on board, what happened to him?
He just touched the ground.
I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, bad news for seniors. The government confirms no cost of living raise for Social Security next year. And in Afghanistan, children as young as 7 are being trained and sometimes tricked into becoming terrorists.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. Americans were mesmerized today by an incredible drama playing out on live television. A homemade helium mylar balloon believed to be carrying a 6-year-old boy was racing out of control across the skies of Colorado. The police said the boy had climbed into a box attached to the bottom of the balloon at his home in Fort Collins, and somehow it took off. After a nail-biting 2 hours, the balloon landed near Denver. But there was no box and no child, and a search began. Then late today, a surprise ending to this story. The boy was found safe, hiding at home. Ben Tracy has been following this incredible story from the very beginning. And Ben, what a relief, but still an awful lot of unanswered questions tonight.
Yeah, Katie, of course, the good news is the boy is home safe, but the big question now is how did this bizarre scene unfold over the course of 2 hours when now we know the little boy was home the entire time?
Going at about 8 knots.
It looked like a flying saucer cutting through the air above Fort Collins, Colorado. Believed to be inside 6-year-old Falcon Heaney, moving at up to 25 miles per hour and soaring to at least 1,200 feet above ground. Those watching prepared for the worst.
Well, the fear is that you're running out of time.
As the drama played out on live TV,
this thing has dropped down now to 500 feet, which would mean
5, 4, 3.
Yet when the balloon made a miraculously gentle landing in a dirt field nearly 40 miles outside of Denver,
It's been a safe landing.
There was no 6-year-old to be found. At first, it was believed the boy was never in the balloon. But then the sheriff's department revealed that Falcon Heaney apparently climbed into a box attached to the balloon. But that box was not seen in any of the video and not there when the balloon landed. The ordeal began when Richard Heaney, the boy's dad, was reportedly testing his weather balloon in the backyard. Falcon's brother told officials he saw the boy get inside and float away.
2 of the boys were up on the roof of the house with a camera saying something about their brother having left on, I thought it was an airplane.
But as it turns out, the little boy was hiding in the garage the whole time.
that's what I told, it was an attic in the garage.
The Heaneys are no stranger to the spotlight, recently appearing on the reality show Wife Swap.
I've been listening to your nagging, you're moaning, you're groaning all day long.
Richard Heaney is a well-known weather chaser who says he believes in extraterrestrials.
No, am I nuts? Am I crazy?
And the boys have several videos on YouTube. So where is Falcon Heaney? Authorities searched the family home and their Fort Collins neighborhood this afternoon. Obviously, we now know Falcon Heaney is at home, and it's a good thing they found him when they did, because they had planned to launch helicopters this evening with night vision to continue the search. So, Katie, a lot of relief there in Fort Collins, but my guess is that little boy is heading for a rather lengthy timeout.
I bet you're right. Ben Tracy, very strange story indeed. Thank you, Ben. Turning to other news now, and seniors are not going to like this one bit. For the first time since the government started giving Social Security recipients an annual cost of living adjustment in 1975, they won't be getting a COLA next year because the government says the cost of living did not go up. To soften the blow of no increase, President Obama is proposing seniors get a one-time stimulus check of $250. Congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes now on the bitter taste of the UnCOLA. Nancy?
Katie, many seniors are stunned. They simply never seen anything like this before. A cost of living adjustment of $0.
If after being a citizen all your life, being a productive working person, what do? You get, slammed. It's really bad.
Social Security increases are tied to the Consumer Price Index, which fell this year for the first time since 1955.
Oil prices went down. Oil prices are running half what they were last summer, and that was enough to take the whole index down, despite the fact that non-oil, it was up about 1.5%.
Healthcare costs, for example, went up 4.1%, as 79-year-old Patricia McElroy well knows.
I have supplemental insurance, and I expect it to go up about $30 a month this year.
Last year, when oil and gas prices were at their peak, Social Security recipients got a record cost of living increase, 5.8%, a $700 boost for the average senior.
That increase every year has been very beneficial, particularly as cost of living has increased and as my rent has increased.
Seniors aren't the only ones who rely on Social Security. It's disabled workers and survivors of some deceased workers. But in this poor economy, older Americans are uniquely vulnerable.
They've seen retirement accounts that have been really decimated in the last year. They see falling home values. And for those who want to try to get a job because they need to work, they find longer periods of unemployment.
President Obama tried to head off the bad news by proposing a $250 emergency payment to seniors and veterans,
which would come out to about 1.8% increase.
All sides appeared open to the idea, which would cost the government $13 billion.
I'd be happy to support the president's proposal if we pay for it out of stimulus funds that have not been spent.
To turn our backs on seniors would be a big, big mistake.
One bright spot to these stagnating prices, many Medicare recipients are likely to see an automatic freeze to their premiums for doctor visits. Katie?
Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill. Nancy, thanks a lot. Meanwhile, President Obama flew to New Orleans today, his first official trip to the region ravaged by Hurricane Katrina. He said he will not forget the 1,600 people killed by the storm and vowed to rebuild New Orleans, as he put it, stronger than before. Our White House correspondent Chip Reed is there.
In some parts of New Orleans' lower Ninth Ward, it's hard to believe it's been over 4 years since Hurricane Katrina.
A lot of emptiness. It was like it's like a whole community just disappeared.
Juliet Allen says President Obama needs to spend some real time here to see how bad things still are. That's why many in New Orleans are so disappointed his first trip here as president is a stopover of less than 4 hours. A quick visit to a rebuilt school and a town hall, where the president heard from only a single critic who wanted to know why payments from FEMA are coming in so slowly.
I mean, I expected as much from the Bush administration, but why are we still being nickel and dime in our recovery?
The president said his team is still cleaning up the backlog from the Bush years.
So we are working as hard as we can, as quickly as we can.
Ever since the campaign, Mr. Obama has taken President Bush to task for his response to Katrina.
I just don't think that there is a sense of urgency in the White House where the president is cracking the whip.
He insists he is cracking the whip.
We have sent more cabinet members to this region than almost anywhere in the country.
The administration has freed up $1.5 billion that was tied up in red tape and directed another billion here from the stimulus bill. Even some Republicans, including Governor Bobby Jindal, have praised the president for streamlining federal aid. Many areas, including the tourist-friendly French Quarter, are once again bustling.
Life is good if you live uptown.
By one estimate, a staggering $75 billion federal dollars has been allocated to Louisiana since Katrina, but little of that money is getting to Ninth Ward residents like Robert Richardson, who lost his house to Katrina.
And it haven't reached this area, you know. It hasn't got here. I mean, look around you, you know.
He's still waiting for President Obama to do something.
I mean, you know, that's why I voted for it. You know, I wanted change.
Another thing that has some people here in New Orleans upset is that the president had to keep his visit short here so he could jet off to San Francisco for a $3 million fundraiser. Katie?
Chip Reed in New Orleans tonight. Thank you, Chip. Turning overseas now, the Taliban launched new attacks today in Pakistan. Among the targets, law enforcement compounds in Lahore, near the border with India. At least 39 people were killed. Richard Roth has details.
The coordinated killing spree started just after breakfast. Militants blew up car bombs in northwest Pakistan, and gunmen in Lahore attacked the country's version of the FBI, along with 2 police training centers. 800 recruits had just begun class at one police school when attackers scaled a wall and started shooting. The battle to subdue them lasted 2 hours and left 6 policemen dead. Reports said women and teenage boys were among the suicide attackers in today's wave of violence. Pakistan's Taliban claimed responsibility for all of it. And the nation's interior minister responded, the enemy has started a guerrilla war. Whatever it's called, just 5 days after attacking army headquarters right outside the capital, the Taliban's rattling nerves and raising questions about Pakistan's ability to protect its security, as well as its stockpile of nuclear weapons. Urged on by the U.S., Pakistan has been threatening to launch a ground offensive against Taliban strongholds along the border. Civilians have been fleeing the region in fear. The message being read in the wreckage tonight amounts to another dare from the Taliban, warning, come and get us. Richard Roth, CBS News, London.
Across the border in Afghanistan, some suicide bombers are as young as 7 years old. Up next, how the Taliban are trying to turn Afghan children into killers. As we reported earlier, the Taliban used teenagers in some of its attacks in Pakistan today. But in Afghanistan, they're recruiting children much younger than that. Tonight, Mandy Clark takes us to Khost in eastern Afghanistan, where she learned about this new tactic while visiting a U.S. military hospital. She continues our series, Afghanistan, The Road Ahead.
These children are being trained by the Taliban and al-Qaeda, the innocent learning the tactics of terror. Boys as young as 7 have to be held by an adult to withstand the recoil of an AK-47. Other children aren't trained, but tricked into carrying bombs. I lost my leg, 11-year-old Idullah says. I'm angry because we're not guilty of anything. Idullah was asked by the Taliban to deliver a basket of fruit to a local commander who was cooperating with U.S. forces. Hidden in the basket was a bomb. However, the commander wasn't injured because the bomb exploded prematurely, hurting Idullah and his 8 friends. Some of them were saved by American surgeons at a nearby military hospital. It's these doctors who say they're seeing more children involved in bombings.
It shows the lengths to which al-Qaeda will go to, and the indifference they have to, these kind of pure kids.
Out of the 9 children that were injured that day, 2 of them lost their limbs and 1 of them lost their sight, but all of them had their lives forever altered. The children recruited by the Taliban and al-Qaeda are often willingly sent to the terror camps by their parents. The promise of free food, shelter, and education for their sons is too difficult to turn down. These children face a lifetime of painful procedures to treat their wounds. 9-year-old Mohammed had a nerve severed in the blast.
Unfortunately, he'll lose function of this part of his leg, foot, and the ankle. Will eventually have to have it amputated.
11-year-old Bachmander was one of the lucky ones. He only suffered a broken leg. He wishes he could go back to his old life. We used to play soccer, he says. Now we can't walk without pain. It's not childhood games that Idullah is worried about now. His father is blind, and as the oldest son, he's expected to take care of his family. Now he doubts he can. He, like hundreds of other children, caught up in a war they had no expectation of fighting. Mandy Clark, CBS News, Khost, eastern Afghanistan.
If you're a seafood lover, you may have noticed Atlantic salmon is suddenly in short supply. That means higher dinner tabs in this country, but also an economic disaster in Chile. Mark Strassman now on a menace that's having a ripple effect around the world.
In Chile's northern Patagonia, in channels sheltered by the Andes Mountains, the salmon are dying. At fish farms, divers check for signs of a waterborne virus called ISA, infectious salmon anemia. Harmless to humans, deadly to Atlantic salmon. ISA has killed millions of salmon here. Adolfo Alvial was production manager at Marine Harvest, the world's biggest salmon company.
How demoralizing was it when all of a sudden you had all these dead fish?
Terrible, Mark. I mean, terrible.
In some areas, there were too many farms producing too many fish in an area that was too small. Once the virus hit, it spread almost everywhere. In Chile, second only to Norway as the world's leading salmon producer, production has plummeted by a third, from 227,000 tons last year to 150,000 tons projected this year.
So this fish is actually 3 days out of the water.
America's fish importers have felt it. Outside Atlanta, Joel Knox's company once imported 75,000 pounds of Chilean salmon a week. That's dropped by 2/3.
I think it was a disaster, not so much a crisis. I think it's past the point of being a crisis.
A disaster that means higher prices to American consumers. Just since last December, the retail price of salmon has jumped 52%, from $2.88 a pound to $4.38 a pound. To save their industry, Chilean farmers are tracking the virus, and farms will take turns shutting down to give the environment a rest.
Smaller but healthier.
Absolutely. That's the hope that I have, as many other people in the industry.
But until this industry recovers, you'll pay more for Atlantic salmon, an industry now trying to swim out of troubled waters. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Puerto Montt, Chile.
And in California, First Lady Maria Shriver is apologizing for talking on a handheld cell phone while driving in violation of state law. Photographers caught her doing it several times, and when he heard about it, Governor Schwarzenegger said, "Thanks for bringing her violations to my attention," and then promised swift action. Now Shriver has put out a statement saying, "I'm sorry, I'll be donating my favorite old cell phone." That's my version of swift action with a higher purpose. And coming up next, reporting from the front line, our correspondent's unforgettable stories from Afghanistan. And finally tonight, covering Afghanistan has been an extraordinary challenge for journalists. The men and women of CBS News will carry the memories with them for the rest of their lives.
There was one incident that really drove home how easy it is to make friends in Afghanistan, but it's even easier to make enemies. I'm Randall Joyce. I'm a producer, and I first came to Afghanistan in 2001.
Our whole goal was to get as close to the Taliban outposts as we could. I'm Jim Axelrod, a CBS News correspondent. I was in Afghanistan right after 9/11.
We were sitting on a roof of a mud fort held by the Northern Alliance, the one group that had successfully fought against the Taliban and not been conquered.
And we were watching as some planes started to come over, and they were U.S. bombers.
Oh.
Are they hitting your positions?
And the commander turned and said,
"That's our front line."
He said, "We appreciate all the support. We're on your side. But if that continues, then you'll be our enemy as well."
It's very frustrating for the soldiers to have this enemy that can't be seen and just have to take it. I'm Laura Logan. I've been going to Afghanistan since after 9/11, and I've lived there for more than a year at a time. There was one occasion with the Marines where we spent 5.5 hours in a canal, in sewage water. When the water dries off, you're covered in flies, you're inhaling fecal matter in the air that you breathe, and in the midst of all of that, you're being shot at, and people are trying to kill you. You are often chasing shadows, and you know that they're watching all the time. They're watching your every move. I don't know if people will ever understand what it's like.
This trip, we flew down to Gardez, where we came across this young Afghan policeman who'd been shot in the leg. I'm Terry McCarthy, a correspondent for CBS News. I first came to Afghanistan in 2001. He was in an American field hospital, and before they put him under, he begged the American medic not to cut off his leg, although the damage was pretty significant. When we saw him, he'd come up from the operation, and he was trying to sit up and look and see whether his leg was still attached or not, and the sense of fear and panic in his eyes just struck me as, what was he doing, this young kid, in this war he didn't really understand?
Our team was the first to gain access to the caves that we had heard so much about, Al-Qaeda's caves. I'm Randall Pinkston, correspondent at CBS News. I've been to Afghanistan 5 times since 2001. I saw this particular cave and I said, let's go to that one. The Guardian told us we could come into the cave. It did occur to me that I might go into that cave and not come out. So we get into the cave and the Afghan doesn't have a flashlight. So he's using a cigarette lighter and he's showing me what's in the cave. And I was petrified when I realized that the cave was filled with ammunition. Thankfully, nothing exploded or we wouldn't be having this conversation now. Seeing that cave was just a reminder of how dangerous that entire country was, and to a great extent still is today.
I first came from Moscow with the Soviet troops and in fact filmed the final departure of the Soviet troops over the Friendship Bridge into Uzbekistan in 1989. I'm Nick Turner, I'm a CBS News cameraman. I was filming in the ruins of a trolleybus park. And they'd been used as barricades during the Civil War 10 years earlier. And I realized as I was filming them that I had filmed the same trolleybuses working in 1982 when I first came under the Soviets, where I saw men and women going about their business, dressed in ordinary clothes. The women were wearing dresses, the men were wearing suits. So, can I look around Kabul now and feel that I've seen any progress since 1982? No, I can't.
And our thanks to all of them. And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.